Hi, everyone. This is Stephanie from Vegan Mainstream, and I'm excited about doing our first webinar Wednesday for 2015. This is something we started, I can't remember if I started in 2009 or 2010. I have to look, but we've been doing this for years. And our goal here is to really each month feature some of the key fundamental things that you should be doing in your business, as well as really kind of establishing or talking about trends, talking about ways that you can stay up to date on what's happening, what's going on, and really some of the exciting things in the world of entrepreneurship or entrepreneurialism, of running a vegan business, and probably most importantly around kind of the marketing, sales, and really how you can sustain an amazing business. So we love, love, love doing these sessions. They're so exciting for me. And I hope you guys feel the same because it's just a great opportunity for us to get together once a month, host these free webinars, and really kind of have a good discussion. I'm hoping today we have a really good amount of people registered for today's session. So I'm really hoping we can be pretty interactive, as well as give you some really good information for today. So if you're new to our webinars, or it's the first time you've been here, we do take questions, and I take questions during the webinar as well. If you're watching it on our site, which most of you should be doing, you should see a question box right below the video. And right on that question box, you'll be able to post in any comments or any questions for me during the webinar. Just so I know you guys can hear me well, which I'm hoping this whole time you can. If someone can just post in that question box for me, yes, I can hear you. I just want to make sure sound is clear. And you guys are also able to see the slides. So if someone could do me that favor, I highly would appreciate it. The other thing that I like to do is I will take questions at the end and definitely set aside some time to make sure I answer anything that may come up during the call. If you do have questions afterwards, you definitely can shoot us a quick email. I know some of you have done that before. If I don't get right back to you, don't worry, I will get back to you as soon as I can. And you can always follow up with me, but we try to make sure you get everything you need from these fun, great sessions. So with that, I think it's time to kind of maybe jump into the slides. We're a few minutes afterwards. I'd like to give everyone a little while to get in here because I know it does take some time to get into the site. I'm actually noticing an issue with our website. So if you are watching or having any trouble or know someone's having trouble, just let me know in the comment box. I'm just noticing that our load time is a little bit slow on the website. So hopefully you guys aren't having trouble accessing the webinar. So with that, let me just talk about what we're going to go through today and why today is really a good time to kind of kick things off. If you are having trouble, you can always watch, look at the link on YouTube. So I know we just tweeted it out on YouTube. So if you're hearing this, you probably are watching it. But as a backup, we have tweeted out an additional link for anyone. All right. All right. So let's talk about, actually, I see some questions are popping in here already. Everyone can hear me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, so glad we have a great group today. Okay, cool. All right. So let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about putting together goals. How do we prioritize it, and how do we get it all done? Now, the reason I put in here not just goals, but the prioritization process and also getting it done, because the challenge we have, and really not just us as vegan business owners, but really any business owner, entrepreneur, or anyone kind of managing a business, is it is a process to create these goals, but it's really kind of an opportunity to perfect your goal setting process by thinking of goal setting as not just thinking of the ideas, but thinking of ways to not only prioritize and making sure that execution piece is a part of your goal setting process. So when you think about goal setting, it's not just sitting down once a year in the beginning of the year and kind of saying, okay, these are the things I'm going to do. It's really thinking of your goal setting process as something you do year round throughout the year. And you have different kind of milestones, check-ins, and things like that, so that your goal setting process is retweaked, reevaluated, remassaged as your business grows. Now, we are going to talk about some of us kind of massage our business goals a little bit too much. So we will talk about that tonight on how do you make sure what's the right amount of time you should be revisiting your goals and talking about your goals and evaluating your goals so you don't get into that analysis paralysis. But tonight, I'm also going to really focus on not just kind of the mechanisms of putting those goals in place, but to give you some tips on how you can help yourself get things done, and really manage this process better as you go into 2015. So, one thing I always like to do and level set, and I've talked about this in other webinars, but I always like to do this, especially in these types of planning sessions, is why it's important to do goals, especially as veg professionals. Some of you have maybe heard me do this rant before. So if you heard it before, hear it one more time, and hopefully it's been soaking in. And for some of you who have maybe been new to me talking about this, is I think a lot of times we all know we should be doing goals. We all get it. Like, we watch videos, we've heard about it, we've taken courses. We're like, yeah, I know I need to do goals. But I think what we forget about is, as us as veg professionals or vegan professionals, we sometimes are in a different space. We're in a different setting often when we're creating our businesses. And it doesn't mean that other industries and other people don't go through this, but I want to, just because as myself as a vegan professional and because many of you are, I want you to think about why the goals are important to what we do and how the goals really help you in your space, and not just kind of the general idea that they should be there, but why they're important, especially for the types of businesses we run. And I'd probably say one of the big reasons that we really need hard and strong goals is because many of us are like not are kind of the alternative to the status quo. We are doing something that hasn't been done before, or there's maybe one other business or two other people who've done it. There may be 3 vegan restaurants in our cities. There may be, I'm the one XYZ in my town or in my place, and so forth. Many of us can lay claim to that. As well as many of you are maybe pioneering and doing something differently, maybe trying to think of something that's going to be kind of trend setting. And if that's the case, as a pioneer, it's so important to have goals, because you have this kind of wide open space. And sometimes that wide open space can be a blessing, and sometimes it can be a little bit dangerous. Because what can happen is, instead of getting focus, anything that comes your way, anything that comes across your path, it's very easy for it to get its own priority. It's very easy for everything to become high priority, because when you're charting your own course, often you really are excited about the possibilities. And because of those possibilities, sometimes those possibilities aren't grounded enough. They're not grounded in the financials. They're not grounded in the time it may take. They're not grounded in understanding the impact they're going to have on your business. They're just excitement. And we need that excitement to get out of bed every day. We need that excitement to push through those hard times and hard meetings and so forth. But we also need to be grounded in numbers, metrics, and milestones, so that you have not only a great idea, but you can see that great idea to fruition. The other reason I always bring this up is, for many of us, we are bootstrapping our businesses. Many of us, we are funding our own businesses. And our goal is for this business to grow and maybe get to a level where someone else is able to or willing to fund us, or we're going to look at other funding opportunities. And if that's the case, you have to document your story. You have to be able to create a track record of saying, I set goal A and I achieved goal A by X date. What happens is that story not only is a great story just from a business standpoint, it is the type of story that investors want to see. They want to see that you have established a process, a way of continuing to grow your business and done it in a documented fashion, not just in your head based on your memory. I remember kind of doing this type of thing. You really want to make sure you start to get that story on paper, and your goals will be a part of that story. They'll be the kickoff point when you start to put them in there. And then as you get better at the goal setting and execution process, you'll get better at documenting that information so that when you're in year 2, year 3, and you're looking to grow and do something big, you'll be able to share with an investor or share with others how you grew from a business with 1 location to 10 locations, how you grew from a business with 10 consulting clients to 1,500 customers, because you've documented that track record. Okay. And there's nothing like putting together a goal and achieving that goal. When you start to see those goals and those things happen, it's easy to repeat good things. It's really easy to repeat a winning strategy. It's easy to repeat a winning marketing campaign. So the more you start to get this stuff on paper and document it, especially in our world, it's going to be easier for you to replicate things, because for many of you, you're doing it for the first time. For many of you, like I said, you're establishing markets. So it hasn't been done before. That hashtag doesn't exist. The community hasn't been brought together yet. And so if you establish and document what you've done, if you're looking to go from local to nationwide, if you're looking to go from local to regional, if you're looking to maybe look at different markets or different target markets, you'll be able to say, I did it for XYZ market. And now as I'm looking to go to market 2, I'm going to leverage some of that work and redo it. And it's so, so important for us, because a lot of our stuff is not documented. There's no Dun & Bradstreet, listing of all the vegan businesses out there. They're not amazing communities that we all can tap into when we're looking for people who want to maybe sign up for your wellness program. It's very difficult to find people who are transitioning to veganism or vegetarian and considering to go to veganism. A lot of that stuff isn't well documented. So when you start to establish your process of, this is how I found my customers, this is how I found people who are interested in transitioning because I'm a wellness coach, this is how I found people who are interested in working on, maybe revamping their household and making sure they're, from the chemicals that they use or the products they use to clean to the products that they use in their body, their makeup, their lotions, their beauty care and health needs, that all those items are vegan. I'm looking for those people. This is how I found them. And once you can document that, it's much easier for you to actually repeat that over and over and over, especially as you launch new products. So say, for example, you're in makeup line and you're doing stuff around, you've done makeup, you've done lipstick and so forth. And now you want to go into skincare. Because you figured it out on the makeup side, it's going to be much easier to replicate on the skincare side. Okay. So hopefully I didn't push on that too hard this time, but I definitely want to make sure you guys get it, that it's so important for who we are and how we're growing. And because we are in a growth industry, it's so important to get this stuff on paper, okay? So I know most of you come today because you're like, yeah, Stephanie, I wanted to do goal setting. That's why I'm here. Um, actually, someone just said that we had a sound issue. Anyone still having trouble with sound? If you're having trouble with sound, just post for me really quick in the comment section. I'm going to look really quick. Sorry, guys. Just want to make sure before we jump into the slides that everyone is good. All right. Let me know if the sound is going out for you. Please, please, please let me know. Don't want you guys to miss anything. Okay. So let's talk about the process. How do you get your goal setting done? And the way I've created the slide and why I kind of talk about building stamina is because I think we all assume that because we've set goals for ourselves, maybe personally Or maybe when we worked at our business, we set goals and we were able to give people an idea of I created them, I submitted them to my boss, or I had to present them in a meeting and so forth. That's great. You need that experience and you have to bring it with you as you migrate over here to managing your own business. But the world can become a little bit different when you're doing it on your own, when you don't have that boss to maybe give you that feedback, when you don't have that team environment, because maybe you haven't been okay. It looks like people can hear me again. Okay. And if you haven't been in that environment now because you're the only person in your business, or maybe you have two or three other people in your business, but you're really kind of in that CEO role and you don't necessarily have a team to bump it up against, or a colleague or someone like that to bump it up against. So you start to find yourself in different territory as you're a business owner, as you're a person, especially when you start to go the entrepreneur route. That's different. So, what I really recommend for a lot of people is to take a step back when you're thinking about setting your goals and think about the type of planning you want to have in your business. So, before you set the actual goals, say, well, how do I want to do planning in my business? And what I mean by that is, many of us have been taught over the years that, you do a 3-year and a 5-year business plan. And as a general rule, the answer is yes. However, if you're a newbie, kind of what I call a newbie, meaning someone who's never ran a business before, never maybe been in a strong leadership role in their current maybe occupation or career you had before starting this business, or if you really are kind of in that first 6 months to a year of kind of ramping up your business, you might want to take more of a newbie approach. Instead of looking at things over a 3 to 5 year basis, you're going to start to manage things and plan things out monthly. Now, for some of you, you may say, oh my goodness, Stephanie, what do you mean? What I mean is, I want you to kind of cut your goals into more manageable chunks. I want you to look at your goals instead of saying, where am I going to be in 3 years? Just say, where do I want to be in a month? Where do I want to be in 60 days? Where do I want to be in 90 days? And then for the places you want to be in a month, create a 30-day plan or a 60-day plan. So create a tighter process of identifying the goals, of setting the goal timelines, and so forth when you're new. And the reason I say do this is for a couple of reasons. Number one, you want to get into that process. Like I said, you want to build the stamina of learning how to set goals and execute those goals. So when you have a tighter focus and you do things on a monthly basis, it does make you focus on a little bit more short-term goals, but you only have to do this for a while until you get good at it. So you may be a newbie for the first 6 months. You may be a newbie for your first year. And then after that, you'll move to what I kind of call the average planning cycle, which means on a quarterly basis, you're setting your goals, and then you create what I call monthly milestones. So monthly milestones are ways you check in on these goals that maybe take about 90 days to create. But so you have a good check-in process, but your goals are a little bit looser. They're a little bit more, okay, what can I get done in a quarter to really move my business forward? All right. And then as you get into the advanced mode, these are people who maybe been in business a couple of years. Maybe this is someone where you're launching your second business. Maybe you've already you've done a lot of this leadership and planning and so forth, maybe in your prior life. And as you're managing your business for the first time, you're saying, okay, I'm ready to take the skills that I gained from my previous career over here. Then maybe you're going to start looking at things on a yearly basis. This is when you're going to start to look 2 years out, 3 years out, 5 years out. And then the same thing, while you're looking further out as far as your plans, then your milestones will often become a little bit further apart. Your milestones may be on a quarterly basis where you're actually evaluating. Does that make sense to everyone? How I kind of broke that down and why I really want you to think about what is your planning process and pick the right planning process before you even get started. Okay? If there's any questions about that, feel free to go in here and post on the site. I'll definitely further explain or hopefully be able to answer that question. So, first stage, are you a newbie? Are you average? Are you advanced? And if that's the case, that's how you're going to start to put your plans together. Step number 2 is I want you to think of your goals in pillars. Instead of just saying with a blank sheet of paper, like, what do I want to do? Or how do I want to build my goals? Or what am I going to do differently in my business? What I want you to do instead is I want you to create pillars of where your goals will reside. And what I mean by that, or the reason I mention this or talk about doing these pillars, is this ensures you have a diverse group of goals. Often when we run our businesses, often when we do some of the planning, it's easy that the thing that's been the most painful or the thing that we've always wanted to do and we're passionate about will often rise to the top of our goals. And when we start to create our goal list, we may end up not having a balanced approach or balanced look at our business. So by sitting down and saying, what are the pillars in my business? What are the things I want to specifically affect in my business? You can ensure that you pick a goal from each one of these pillars. So let me explain the pillars I have here. I find for the most part, most businesses are really managing around 4 pillars. One is around profit, trying to find ways to either create profit and revenue or to um, find ways to increase that profit, which can mean reducing expenses. It can mean moving into other revenue models and so forth with the existing product offering that you currently have. Okay. The other one is around growth. That for many people, they're trying to optimize the profit, the money they have. And in addition, they're trying to grow bigger. So this is where you're doing an expansion strategy. Maybe you're expanding to more stores because you've been in, let's say, Whole Foods and many of the local natural food stores. Maybe you're trying to go into bigger regions or different regions. Maybe you're looking at new target markets. Maybe you've done beauty or skincare products for women, and now you're thinking of doing some for men. I just learned about these like beard balms that people are selling. My husband started to grow a beard, so I was researching it the other day, and it's kind of cool. Like I hadn't even heard of these things that are really exciting that are coming out. So maybe you're in that kind of space where you've done beauty products, you've done hair products, skincare products, and it's a natural transition for you to look at men care or men's skincare products. That is in the growth side. The other thing you always want to have is a pillar of focus on your customers. What are you doing for your customers? And what does it mean as far as goals that you have that directly affect your customers? Now, obviously, the products that you offer are going into more stores. Down the line, it has an effect on customers. But I find it's important to have a pillar specifically around what your customers experience or what your customer has been asking for. So maybe customers have been asking for new products. Maybe customers have been asking for, maybe you've only done one type of payment option, and maybe customers want additional ways to be able to pay on your website. Maybe customers want a different experience as far as they work with you. You've maybe had a retail store and you're thinking about going into an online opportunity so people can buy and get items shipped to them. So think about really kind of that customer focus and making sure that when you set your goals, you have a goal that directly impacts your customer. And then the last pillar I like to put in there is community. I'm big on trying to find ways to help the community and give back. Now, that may not be your thing. Completely understand. It's not a requirement. But these are the ones I'd probably suggest starting with. So if you're not sure where to start, or you're like, Stephanie, I get the idea, what do I do next? Then I would take each one of these 4 pillars that I gave you as a starting point, and I would create a goal within each one of them. So that way you have a balanced goal setting process and a balanced goal setting kind of view, as well as you really make sure that your goal setting is something that when we look at the results of it, we can come back and make sure that not only are there things that help your customer, but there are also things that help you become a much more sustainable business and help you become a better kind of socialpreneur or really a ambassador for the community. Now, for some of you, these may not be the right 4. So sit down and think about your 4. But this, I believe, is really kind of step number 2 in your process of making sure you understand what those pillars are. Okay. Has anyone ever tried that before? Set up these kind of pillars and thought of your goals in buckets as opposed to thinking of your goals on a blank sheet of paper? And if so, just post it in the questions box. I want to see what you guys are thinking or have experienced. Um, the other thing I kind of see as step 3 in the process is when you set your goals, you also want to set your evaluation process at the same time. And the reason that is that helps you start to link your goals to how you're going to execute against them. And what that means is, how are you going to manage these projects? When you come up with a goal, and I'll talk about how you roll down from a goal all the way down to a project in a few slides. But what I want you to do is say, well, how am I going to manage these goals? Am I going to get a project management tool? Am I going to use Excel? Am I using Google Docs? Like, what am I actually going to use for that flow so that I can become accountable for them? Otherwise, they become a sheet of paper with goals on them, and they don't really have the tools and support to make it happen. The other thing is, when you start to think about these goals, we have to decide who's responsible. Now, for many of you, you're small businesses. You only have yourself, maybe one other person, or something like that. And that's perfectly fine. If you're going to be responsible for them, or if you're splitting them between your partner, or if you're going to own few and maybe you have someone, who's doing some contract work for you and they're technically going to be responsible for that project, then that's what we want to do. We just want to understand who's going to keep the ball rolling. And the reason being is, when we get to the last item on here where I talk about the evaluation meeting, we want to make sure that the people who are supposed to come in and present the status are in that meeting. So if you have a team, if you have someone who is going to pick up or own that goal, they have to come to the evaluation meeting. They have to be there to report out where things are and what's happening. As well as, when you are the business owner yourself, the reason why I like to type in who's responsible is because as we start to set our goals, sometimes we don't realize that as a business owner, we've signed ourselves up for 15 goals. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that. Is, I don't recommend that many goals in your business. I really see most people, especially if you're a newbie, you're going to be like 3 to 4 goals. If you're more the advanced or average, you may be looking at 4 to 6 goals. This list should be short. It shouldn't be a big list of goals. And the reason being is, goals are big things. They're supposed to be things that are really moving your business forward. We're not talking about little tasks. We're not talking about things like, oh, I want to put a sign up button on my website. That's important and something probably needs to be done, because you got to grow your email list. But we're talking about things that are monumental and important to your business and can make a huge financial kind of benefit to your business as well. So when you're thinking about these goals, they really should be a smaller number. As well as, when you look at all your goals on the list, you want to make sure that you haven't signed yourself up for too many goals. And if you find yourself that you kind of got too many goals on the list and you got too much going on, then it's time to prioritize. And this is where most of us fall down. Most of us say, okay, I'm going to keep all these goals because they're all great ideas and I can't let them go because they're going to be amazing and they're going to make my business amazing. And the answer is yes, they probably will make your business amazing. They probably, maybe not all are great goals, but I'm sure there's a good amount of them that are great goals. And if that's the case, we got to know which are the best of the great list, let's say, for example. Because I think sometimes we think that everything is really a number one. In reality, not everything's number one on your list. There are things that are number one and number two. And often when we set those goals, like I mentioned, if you're a newbie, you're going to do 3 or 4 goals. Those 3 or 4 goals are your number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you got to get comfortable with the idea that the goals have to earn that number 1 spot. They have to earn that spot to be number 2, number 3. They can't just be good ideas. They have to almost be proven to be, or proven in your mind to be, which one's better than the other. So you have to evaluate your goals against each other. Now, we're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about goals and action plans and steps. And I know for many of you, the idea of a goal versus a strategy, and we throw around all these terms all the time. While we can get into definitions of them, the reality is it's not so important to get into the definition of the terms. It's more important to say, what is that basic goal? And then as you go into the next slide, we'll talk about how you can better define it so that it's clear the difference between what's truly the goal versus what you're trying to achieve versus some of the action steps. So if you see the word goal here and you're like, oh, well, I'm not sure what's going to be a goal versus an action and so forth, hold off on that in a few minutes. Um, we'll talk about that. But if you're not sure right now, just put it on the list. Because the idea is we have to decide what's most important for you to drill down into. And the reality is, if you have 10 ideas or 15 ideas, you don't have the time to chase everyone down. So that's why you got to do this quick prioritizing exercise. Is it absolutely perfect? Is it the way to evaluate everything to the nth degree? No. But what it is for is so that you can make a strategic and strong decision for your business without investing 3 weeks, 4 weeks to decide where to focus. Okay. So for some of you, you may have a little bit of a control issue of letting go and making a decision based on the information you have today. But as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, you have to get more comfortable with that. You may not have all the answers when you have to make your decisions. So get comfortable with making the best decision you can with the information you have today. Okay. So how does this work? First, you put your goal in one column. Second, I put the activity. The reason I put the activity in there, it just helps give me a little bit more definition on where is the focus of that goal. So if I'm looking for new revenue channels, the idea is that I'm looking for that more in my classes offerings as opposed to in my consulting business, as an example. So a lot of times I'll put that in there just so I have an idea of what I'm focusing on or where that focus is. Okay. If you need a third column because you're going to put the goals in there, the activity, maybe you got to put some tasks in there because they're just pouring out of you, that's perfectly fine. Let's get it on paper. But the key here is once we list out that goal and those activities, we have to prioritize them. And I like to use 3 different ways to prioritize. I like to look at what is going to have the biggest impact on my business. And often when I'm measuring impact, I'm thinking financial impact. I'm thinking impact as far as taking my business into the next level. But often I like to back it up with a little bit more on the financial side, a little bit more on how this is going to allow me to really create the sustainable business I want. Now, is that cold cut? It means it makes X amount of money or B amount of money a year? No, this is only a gauge. You're trying to figure out what items are things that have a direct link into your financial impact. And some things are still going to be necessary to get done and have low financial impact. So don't think just because something's on the low side on the impact doesn't mean you're going to choose it. It's just that we got to start somewhere and pick some specific criteria. The other thing I like to measure against is time, meaning how long will it take for me to implement? Because in many cases, when I'm building a strategy, especially for you guys who are more in that advanced planning stages, you need to know what should be done earlier in the year versus later in the year. If you're doing something and you're planning on quarterly basis or yearly basis, you need to think about maybe some of those items that you have to start in 2015 so you can get the impact in 2016 versus items that if you start today, you'll be able to get the impact in 60 days, 90 days. So how do I do that? I just break things up between what has a long-term timeline to get done versus a short-term timeline. And then the last one, I kind of use it as ease. And the reason I use this is kind of thinking about your resources, any kind of thing that would make it hard to implement this. And what I like to do is say, is this something hard to do, something medium, something easy? And this ease has to do with your business. It has to do how easy it is for you to get something done. So say, for example, maybe you're doing a major website redesign. If you're not a coder and you don't already have a coder, or you haven't kind of gone through the process, or a website redesign is terrifying for you, then you might want to put this on the hard side. While the impact may be high and the timeline may be short, because you can get it done in a couple of months, it may end up being on the hard side just because based on your current resources and the current state of your business, it may be kind of easier or hard. Okay. So what you do is you list all the items in here and independently you go one by one and say, okay, what's the impact of this one? What's the time? What's the ease? And then you go to the next one. Once you finish that, you look at this in total and actually say, okay, which one of these items maybe have a high impact easy to implement and have a short-term benefit or short-term to get implemented. And often those are the ones that are going to rise to the top. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to take the ones that are always high impact short-term and easy. You might end up with some that are a little bit more moderate, but this is going to help you start to see some natural separation between your ideas and your concepts and between some of these goals that you've started to put together, so we can narrow this down to a list of 3 to 4, like we were talking about before. Okay. So once you use this and you got it down to 3 or 4, now for some of you, you're like, oh, Stephanie, I need that fifth one. Okay, we can do the fifth one, but don't go beyond that. Really, really give yourself the discipline to pick 3 to 4. Because the thing I always tell a lot of people is sometimes we get so nervous, we think we have to have all the goals and all the ideas already in plan or already in motion. And that's not really the case. The reality is you pick 3 goals, and if you knock them out of the park, you're going to have more bandwidth and more room to move to goal 4 and move to goal 5 because you've completed those. As opposed to if you started 5 goals at the exact same time, that's a lot. That's like, trying to take, I won't use an analogy, but the idea is the more projects you have to work on simultaneously, unless you have a huge team, often the harder and sometimes the longer it will take for you to get them done. So having a shorter list, especially in small businesses, is often to your benefit because it gives you the time and the bandwidth to actually get those done and move to the next project. Also, there's nothing like completing a project and having that feel-good feeling of actually completing and achieving a goal that you set out there. So don't get scared when I put these numbers in front of you or when I say, 3 to 5. Trust me. You really want to start with those numbers, get comfortable with them. And remember, because we have them on paper, because we've documented them, we can come back to it. So when you knock out those first 3, you can always come back to it and say, I already know what number 4 is because I've done the work, I've done the research, and I've focused on it already. Okay. How are we doing so far? Any questions so far? Any of this stuff kind of makes sense? I mean, that's the hard part about doing a webinar. I can't see those head nods on the other side. But, just posting the questions. They don't have to be questions. They can be comments too. If this sounds like something you can do, or if this is sounding helpful as you're starting to do your planning for this year. Okay. So let's talk about translation. Because the challenge is we get the ideas, they're all kind of gobbled up in our heads sometimes, or we get an idea and we think it's a good goal, but you really have to drill down on it. And like I mentioned before, you're going to have a lot of goals sometimes when you do the initial planning. And since we can't drill down on every single one of them, we want to drill down on those important ones. This is the time you start to do that. And I really would recommend seeing this as a template. So we will give you access to the slides after the presentation, so you can download this and grab it. So you don't have to take screenshots right now if you don't, especially because it might be small on your screen depending on where you're looking. But what I like to do is create a template like this for all of my goals. And the reason I create this template is this helps me turn my goals into, a lot of times people use those terms SMART goals and so forth. This helps me get to that level and get to that level in a very clear and concise way. This also helps me not get caught up in definitions of terms. It's not really about, is this a strategy versus a goal versus a project versus, an action item. Really kind of divorce yourself from that whole challenge and just think in terms of, why am I doing what I'm doing? What do I want to do? When do I want to either start this project, or when am I going to stop it by, complete it? How will I measure progress? How will I know if this goal that I set is working? Like, what is my kind of intermediary way of managing it? And then I call them action steps, but this is really the how. This is where a lot of times you're using the words like projects and so forth, but this is really the how. This is how you're going to get it done. So if you look at it more from that perspective, I think you might get a clearer view into setting these goals and the details that you need. The other thing is, by looking at it in this grid format, I really hope this helps. What this does is it allows you to really look at a goal, not just kind of in plain text or plain terms, but also putting some metrics behind it. Because where most of us fall down on our goals is um, we don't put the numbers behind it. We just think of an idea like, man, I got to get more clients. But there's a difference between I want to work with more clients and saying I want to get a 20% increase in clients per month. That's much more measurable because you can say, well, how many clients do I have right now? And what's 20% of that number? Okay. If I want to make that change, when do I want to get it in place by? March 31st. I want to get it in place in a couple of months. Okay. How do I know that the process is working? Or at least maybe what's an early sign for me? Because, getting more clients is a long-term process. You have to get them to your website. You may have to get them on the phone. You may have to talk to them. Maybe you do a free consult with them first, and then you get, and then they sign up. Same thing with products that you're selling. Maybe people have to sample the product if they're buying them in a store or a deli or something like that. Maybe people have to hear about or read about, so they follow you on Facebook because you sell your products online. The idea is there's kind of a system to that. So if that's the case, what that means is you need a milestone to say, how do I know I'm heading in the right direction? An example would be, especially if you have any type of consulting based business, is to say, okay, I want to get at least 30 inquiries or 30 people to sign up that say they're even interested in doing a consulting with me per month. Because there's always going to be fallout. There's so many people that are going to say, yeah, I want to set up time. Can we talk about the product? Yes, I'm interested. And so many people just won't sign up because that's just the way it works. We always have what we kind of call conversion rates. But if I have that milestone, what happens is while I'm implementing this and also as I get it in place, I will know if not only is the project making progress, but am I achieving or getting closer to my goal? And then the action steps are literally, what do I need to do? Do I need to build a target list? Do I need to contact previous clients to maybe get some referrals? Do I need to do some Facebook ads? What are the things that are going to help me hit that milestone, which will ultimately help me hit the what, which is the actual goal. So in the end, I can actually achieve my why. All right. On average, what I find is for every line here that you have, so for every achievement and goal that has a timeline and a milestone, I normally list about 5 action steps that are needed to complete each one of these goals. Now, for some of you, once you've turned them into action steps, you're going to have to now move into that project management tool like we talked about before. And for that project management tool, you're going to take some of those action steps and maybe drill down even further. Because if you need to build a target list, the question is going to be where you're going to get it from and so forth. But that's all project management stuff. That's not necessarily goal setting yet. That's truly at the project management level. I think the key, especially to creating lasting goal setting kind of stamina, like I mentioned, is getting your goals down to this type of detail level, as well as getting into the practice of making sure you've prioritized so that you don't have a list of 15, 20 of these on your plate. Okay. Anyone have any questions about how to translate that or the goal? I know one person just asked about a repeat. We'll actually have a replay of this. So if you jumped in a little bit late or had some trouble accessing it, you will be able to watch this again. So don't worry. You can watch it and see if there's anything else, any other questions that you have. Okay. But once again, use this like a template. This is going to be your tool to kind of help you get there. So one other thing I wanted to talk about in this webinar is we wanted to talk about getting goals and setting them and creating them and all that good stuff. But I also wanted to talk about like, how do you get it all done? Because you can have all the plans in the world, but without kind of some tips or maybe some recommendations that I have here, I find that many of us just struggle with actually implementing the things that we set, especially when we do these exercises in January. So I wanted to give you about 4 different tips as we wrap up the webinar today on things that you can do to kind of help you get it done. All right. So hopefully earlier slides or maybe had you looking at goal setting a little bit differently or maybe simplifying it so the goal setting process is not too complicated. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well in some of the tips. But what I also want to do is I want you to start thinking about your goals a little bit different than something you just kind of put on paper, but something that's kind of living and breathing and something that you actually do. And what I mean by that is to get the goal setting done, I've found the biggest thing that makes a difference is scheduling things. And when I say schedule it, what happens is often we put our projects in project management tools. And I love project management tools. But for many of us, when our bad habits set in, we just don't check our project management tool. We get busy with email, we get busy with phone calls, we get busy with meetings, we get busy filling orders, making product. And what happens is we don't go into those tools because they're kind of the tool we've made ourselves learn to use, or we've made ourselves kind of use to kind of manage these projects. And what I found is I like to use a tool that I use for everything and I use every day. I use my calendar. I use Google. Some of us use iCalendar, or maybe use an Outlook, whatever tool that you're using for scheduling meetings. I'm going to recommend that you not only schedule meetings in your calendar, but you schedule other things. And what I mean by that, probably the first thing, is create a daily schedule. And what I mean by that is take your average day. For some people, they want to do an average day over, you can do 7 days a week. I do 5 days a week. So I just gave you kind of an example of one of my daily schedules I've done in the past. But sit down and say, in my day, how do I want to organize my day so that I can get everything done that I need to get done? And when I say that, put in the personal stuff too, especially if you're working full time from an entrepreneur standpoint. That put in there the things you need to do. Like I have in here, I get dressed in the morning. Even though it's a little cold lately, I've been waking up a little bit later. But I put things in here like I like to early in the morning do a lot of my networking. I use a tool called Nimble for my client management tool. So if I'm reaching out to email to people, following up with them, sending out notes, I do that first thing in the morning. Then what I like to do is I like to handle my food situation early. If I can, I try to cook earlier in the day. Lately, that's changed because my workout schedule has moved around a little bit. But I put this schedule in place when my husband was going to work. So often I would actually make food for him for lunch early in the morning. And I scheduled that in because it was important for me to get it done. And was also important because I wanted to make sure I had time for it so I didn't feel rushed when it came to my business stuff. When I wanted to get into my business mode, I wanted to make sure I got some of these personal items done and out of the way. I made a commitment to myself to start working out, so I put time aside for working out every day. And I know for many of you, you might be a little surprised that I have some personal stuff in here, but I think it's so important as a business owner that you don't put these blinders on and think of your business schedule and your work schedule as completely different. Even when we work full-time jobs, we often have other things that we need to get done in a week and so forth. So as a business owner, it's so important to have a strong daily schedule because it's easy because there is no boss laying around or someone around kind of saying, hey, did you get this done by this day? There's no one telling you if you can take off on a Tuesday or not take off on a Tuesday. So what I like to do is create this standard schedule. Doesn't mean every single day I do exactly this, but as a general rule, what I do is I set aside time from 9 to 11 where I work on what I kind of call my vegan mainstream projects. On here, I broke them down. I work on my newsletters on Wednesdays. I work on my boot camps, any promotions or campaigns or any research I do. I tend to work on those on Thursdays. On Fridays, I work on my classes or her Vegan Mainstream University. From 11 to 3, I set aside time to work on client projects. Because of my business, I do a lot of client work. I do a lot of client coaching, project planning, and so forth. So what I try to do is set aside time for that. And what this does is, like we talked about, all these projects and goals and things that we come up with, by having that time between 9 and 11, I can work on the goals that I set out for my business every single day. Now, I just broke mine down between what I want to do on those days. For you, you may just want to block off a certain time and go into your calendar and block off that time. Block off 2 hours just to work on your projects. You'll be surprised how much you can get done when you start to dedicate that amount of time. Now, for some of you, that might be scary. So block off 2 hours on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. Pick 2 days a week and just get started. The other thing I've started to do is I've started to try to get my meetings, especially anyone who does a lot of meetings or has a huge meeting schedule. I highly recommend try to tighten up your meetings around the specific times of day, because meetings is a very different mode than project management mode. So by having, I normally do my meetings in the afternoon. I have 3 to 5 here. That's expanded now, and a little bit different now. But what it really helped me when I first started. This is the schedule I used for last year. Is it helped me make sure that I was kind of in meeting mode and I always had time to meet with clients every day. I made my schedule available. Now, if you're maybe somebody who prepares products or makes products, you do some of the manufacturing. It's the same thing. Set time aside for when you do your manufacturing work, and then set aside time for your actual desk work. Set time for these projects that you've committed to. And maybe it can't be every day, but every other day, and put it on your calendar. And the reason I say put it in your calendar and not just your project management tool, because it's important to get those pop-ups on your screen and on your phones and all those things that'll say, hey, Steph, it's project management time. Because what happens is we'll run through the day. You get so busy, there's so many fireworks and things going on that is taking your attention away. But when I see something pop up like a meeting, I go, oh, I got to stop what I'm doing because I have a meeting coming up. You want to start to treat your projects that same way and say, okay, I got to wrap up what I'm doing now because I've set aside time to work on my projects, and I'm going to do that. The other thing is the planning process that you do in the beginning of the year. Put some time aside each quarter. It doesn't have to be long. It can be about an hour, maybe 30, 45 minutes, and put that on your schedule. Put it on your schedule to say, I'm going to have a meeting, whether it's a team meeting or whether you're just going to have a meeting with yourself. Put it on your calendar, and also put the reminders in there. Tell yourself, 2 days before, to remind you that, hey, I said I want to have a planning meeting in the second week of April to look at my current goals, look at if I need to do any retooling and any changes. And I want to do that in the second week of April, and schedule it, because you'll be surprised when it pops up. You're like, oh, I got to get that done. Oh, I got to prepare for it. And you're almost treating it like a meeting. Because what I find is we have a really good response, many of us, to meetings and things like that. So by scheduling it, I found this really makes a big difference. And then the last thing is, if you have any major milestones, like we have some goals for us where I'm revamping all of our vegan mainstream websites. And while there's a ton of projects that have to happen in between, I have a drop dead date that I want to have all of our websites done by. I put that milestone in my calendar so that I know when I look at the month, or when I'm planning, or I'm trying to say, okay, what do I have going on this month? I know that, hey, the major project of websites is supposed to be done by this date. And it's another way of having a reminder, another way of putting it kind of in a tool that we're using every single day. Okay. So I hope for some of you, that's a good idea. All right. Let's talk about tip number 2. Tip number 2 is the idea parking lot. Now, the reason I mentioned the idea parking lot is, for many of us, is we struggle with getting our goals done because new goals come up or new ideas come up, and they start to compete with your existing goals and ideas. So what I recommend for people is to create a parking lot, create a place where you document, whether it's your little doodling system like the image here. But the idea is, for most of us, I'd probably recommend using something like a Google Docs, a Google document, is start to document all your new ideas, cool ideas. So-and-so said they're doing this. The industry is doing this, or I heard this business is doing this and maybe I can do it. Put all that stuff on paper and in one place. The reason being is, when it's time for you to relook at your business, like we talked about on a quarterly basis, you're going to have a planning meeting. You want to be able to go to one place and find that information. You don't want to have to try to remember it. You don't want to look for that random sheet of paper that you wrote on, or that Post-it note that you wrote on 3 months ago or 2 months ago. You want to have it in one place. The other thing is, I want you to get into the habit of coming up with new ideas, but putting them on paper and letting them go until the next planning process. For many of you, you're going to be planning on a quarterly basis. So when you come up with an idea, it's only a few months away before you're going to evaluate it and determine if it needs to be executed or worked on right away. Now, I know there's some anxiety when you have something new and you think it's hot, it's time to work on it. But I highly recommend getting used to the process of coming up with great ideas, letting them kind of simmer, put them on a sheet of paper, and then coming back to them Because in business life, 2 months is really not that long of a time. As well as we're going to need to make sure that we evaluate your new ideas against your existing goals. Because what often happens when we come up with a new idea, we get so excited that we assume it should be number one. And what we might not have done is sat down and say, is this idea better than a current goal I'm working on, a current project within a goal I'm working on? Because without doing that evaluation, or even have that general, even if it's a little talking to yourself discussion with yourself, you can run into the issue of adding more and more goals to your list and realizing that while it's a cool idea, it may not have the same impact as something you're already working on. Okay. And then the last thing I would say is anytime you write an idea down, make sure you explain or think about why it's a good idea for your business. Because sometimes we find ideas or we hear about stuff and we think it's exciting, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for our business. It might work for someone else. It might need to be tweaked and worked on. But make sure when you are putting us in that parking lot that you're willing to not only say what the idea is, but why you think it's good for your business. It's going to make your planning process much easier when you come back to it in a few months, as well as it's going to make it much easier for you to evaluate it against a goal that you're already working on, and also make a decision on, does the new goal truly trump the existing goal? Because in some cases, if you've been working on a goal for 2 or 3 months, you might have gotten that goal so far along that the impact of it by working on it for another 30 days without interrupting it will probably be bigger than starting fresh on the other goal. So that hopefully will get some of the anxiety out of the process, and also avoiding some of that pitfalls that we all fall into of just adding more and more goals. And that's how we don't get things done. All right. Number three is you got to have an evaluation process for your goals. So you can't just say, I want to get this done and turn it into project management mode. There has to be a milestone that's included in your project that says it's a go or no go. And what I mean by that is sometimes we come up with really cool and exciting ideas, but sometimes they don't pan out. And what happens is we get so excited, and kind of the second bullet point I talk about here is we get so excited about the project and the progress that the project is making that we don't think about the progress that we're making towards that goal. So, like I mentioned earlier, I talked about in the slide about getting new clients. And I talked about one of the key milestones is getting enough people to actually sign up. I think I had 30 people, I think, to sign up per month. So you may decide, is my go or no go milestone is, if I'm not able to get to that 30 number, what do I do? Is this a project that we're no longer going to move forward with? Is this a project that we're going to retool and I got to put it back into the planning process because it's not strong enough and it's not delivering? You really have to think of your goals as things that they're not a gimme just because you came up with the idea. They have to fight for survival in a sense. That kind of sounds a little rough, but you know what I mean. They have to really make sure that they should stay on the path. And the reason I say that is this is another one of those pitfalls. Because we don't evaluate the goal and how are we getting towards the original goal, and we tend to evaluate the project progress, we lose sight of why we did this in the beginning. We lose sight of, is it a time to either retool, stop, or continue to move forward? And without that, that's how you can get into this kind of never ending, get it done loop, because we're really just looking at project task as opposed to the original goal. And then the last thing is you got to trust yourself. You got to make some decisions and move on. You have to decide, am I going to continue with this new product offering? Am I going to continue with building the website the way I'm building it? Am I going to continue expansion if I'm not seeing the growth in sales that I expected? It doesn't mean you're shutting down and closing up shop. It just means it's time to retool, go back into that planning stage and tweak things so that you don't end up in this process where you've been working on this project for 9 months, and over the 9-month period, you haven't hit any of your milestones, but you continue to work and you actually kind of evaluate the fact that, I've worked hard. I should, in a sense, get the benefits. All right. And then the last tip, I know we're right at the top of the hour, but I just want to squeeze in one more tip before I have you guys go is think about rewarding yourself. I find this is really good motivation. I think as business owners and entrepreneurs, we forget that we need to be rewarded as well. Often for our employees or our team, we will do incentive programs, we'll offer promotions or things. If, we a lot of times, many of you have probably worked in corporate environment and so forth, where the sales team, if they reach X amount of sales, they all win a trip, or they get free lunch or something like that. It doesn't have to be so big. But I think we forget to translate that over to us as business owners, especially us, those that are running small businesses where there's one, two, three of us. We really kind of don't think about that reward mechanism. And I find that by adding that reward mechanism, it makes it easier for you to get things done. Because what happens is you start to feel a personal benefit attached to what you're achieving. As a business, it's often we kind of say, well, if the business is good, we're good. And in some cases, that can be true. But I do think there's an opportunity for us to do good things for ourselves and reward ourselves for doing good work. So that may mean something like you have an incentive, and it may be something basic, like if I can get this project done by this time, or if I can keep this project under budget, or if I'm able to get X amount of sales in the next 2 months, I'm going to do a spa day. I'm going to spend some time and just get my nails and my hair and my good stuff and my stuff done. So it doesn't have to be crazy big. It's just a way for you to show your own appreciation for yourself. And the reason how that works, even in your own psyche, is it makes you more geared up after you've done that spa day to come back that next week and push hard on the next goal. Because what happens sometimes is we get so much resistance as business owners between the challenges we have every day, the challenges we have personally, the challenges that are happening in our businesses, that those things can get us down. So you have to really work on rewarding yourself to keep you pushing through this goal setting process. And some of that may be a salary increase. I know a lot of times we don't think about paying ourselves as employees. So what I highly recommend is, for anyone who's running a business, as a side note, even if it's an LLC and from a federal tax standpoint, it all rolls up to you, you still should be paying yourself a salary, even if it's $100 a month. I mean, even if it's something really small. But that's a small thing to do, is to say, if I can get this sales increase, I'm going to take myself up to $125 a month. So while nobody's surviving on $125 a month, I understand that. The point is that you're showing yourself, or you're showing yourself, that for every time I achieve one of my goals, I'm actually compensating myself differently. It's the same mechanism you would do for your team, same mechanism you would do for your employees. So I'm saying turn that around and do that for yourself. Or maybe you're going to do things like shorten hours. If you can actually get some of these projects to work, maybe instead of working till 11 o'clock at night, you're going to try to shorten those hours and try to get out of the office at 7 o'clock. Maybe if you can get this project done, the promise to yourself is that you're going to hire someone to actually take over that project. So therefore, the reward of it is not just creating a sustainable product or business or affecting your customer, but it's also taking some of that weight off of you by hiring or bringing in, maybe it's contract work. I'm not saying someone full-time at this point, that can help you with that process, because you got that product line, because you got that revenue stream going. Now you're able to pay someone to help you do more. And that can be a reward in itself as well. So I find those 4 things I find really helping getting them done, because now you started to reward yourself. You've come up with a really good way to evaluate, so these goals don't just sit on the shelf and collect dust. You find a great way of creating that parking lot so that you can put things on the shelf and not let the anxiety of a new idea keep you from focusing on an existing great idea. And then the biggest thing around scheduling it is starting to really create time in your day, in your week, to actually get this work done. So it's not seen as the after work hours, the work you do at 10, 11 at night when you're completely exhausted. It's work that you've scheduled into your day so you can make sure you can actually get it done. All right. So with that, I know we're at the top of the hour. I don't know if you guys have any quick questions. I'm here for a few more minutes if you have any other questions about today's webinar, or about some of the topics that we talked about today. If not, I'd love to hear what you guys thought. If you guys enjoyed it, I hope it was helpful. I see I got a couple comments in here. People are saying that they're newbies and that this will be really helpful for them. I'm glad to hear that. And another thing I always let people know, I mentioned that thing about being newbie and advanced and average. There's nothing wrong with being a newbie. Like, be proud of sometimes being a newbie and being comfortable with that, because it's so important to build, like I said, that stamina around goal setting and making it a two-step process where you set the goals and you execute against those goals. And the more practice you get, the better and better you get at it. So I'm really happy to see these comments in here. I hope you guys enjoyed today's webinar. I know I had fun as always. It's always great to take this time and have this opportunity. We had a great amount of people. We actually had a pretty good registration this time around. So I'm really happy that we had so many people register and also so many people joined. So with that, I'm going to wrap up today's webinar. Once again, thank you very, very much for joining us. I'm Stephanie from Vegan Mainstream, and I hope you will join us for our next webinar in February. It's on February 11th. I think the February webinar is about, oh shoot, I thought I had it here at my fingertips, but I don't. Oh, I'll just send you guys a link. I'm not sure which one's for February. I set the whole schedule for the whole year, but anyway, I hope you'll join us on February 11th. I'll send you guys a link so you can register for the next webinar. And as always, thank you for sharing your evening with me. I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.